Okay. Now that everyone's connected, so welcome to our last class. Uh, this is the last little piece. Um, I want to break down a couple of things real quick for you all. Um, just some kind of points of order. So sorry about Thursday. I had all types of issues trying to connect. I tried 3 different times to connect before I could actually connect um, to Zoom. And I don't know if it was an issue on Zoom side or if it was an issue on my network side. My I know Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, my internet provider has just been absolutely crawling. So I don't know if it's something with that or what else. I'm glad I could finally get in today. I only had to try twice. Um, so a couple of quick things. Number one, I sent an email out yesterday um, asking if you guys would be willing to fill out a little survey on video usage in the class. Most of you guys just attended the class um, here, and so but I do know a couple of you had to miss 1 or 2 times. Let me see if I can share my screen real quick and show you what it looks like.
I completed the survey already.
This one, the little video usage in class.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
Awesome.
yes. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This is more just for me, and I want to share this with my department chair and dean and stuff, because they were curious. They know I've been taking these and recording these, and so I'm glad that you're able to do that. If you see someone else who's in the class but has not been attending on a regular basis, if you would ask if they could fill it out too, I said I sent out the email. I'll probably do another email just reminding people. Also, if you've not filled out the one for the school uh, class survey, that would be helpful to do as well. Um, I had 1 or 2 people from this class already fill it out. I don't know if anyone else did. Last one I saw was like, I think on Saturday. They said it like 2 or 3 times a week, and I think today's the last day for that. So if you haven't had a chance to, if you could go ahead and do that, I'd appreciate that. Um, oh, hold on. See if I can update that real quick. And get that to reload. So today we're going to talk. Last week we talked about HTML forms, and we covered a lot of different aspects of HTML forms. Kind of a high level thing, but we showed you how to create some forms and how you can. The input tag is used for like everything, almost. At least that's the way it seems. But there are a lot of ways to use it, a lot of ways to style it, and stuff like that. So we talked about that. Today I want to talk about, and this is just going to be a very, very high level, different types of programming that you might find involved on a web page or on your website. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, because that often ties in with a form. Being able to collect information is nice, but then we have to do something with it. And doing something with it is going to be programming. Now, I know you guys aren't comp sci majors and stuff, so we're not actually going to get into the nuts and bolts of programming. You couldn't do that in one class. That would not be fair to anyone. It wouldn't be fair to you. Wouldn't be fair to me to try to explain it. So don't worry about that. But we just want to talk about what it is and how it can be used and stuff like that. And then finally, I want to talk about, and I'll talk about now. I know I've got a couple of completed websites. I have already graded 2 of the 3 that are turned in. You have until I think it's Thursday to finish it, so you got some time, but don't forget about it. And then we'll have a quiz. The quiz is going to be just like the last quizzes and stuff like that. It just counts as the regular quiz, doesn't count extra. I never was a big fan of the like half of your grade is due on the last day of class. That's not cool. That's like super freak out type thing. I had one of my tests or one of my classes when I was in school. In fact, my very first class. was like that. Literally 50% of my grade was due on the last day of class. So you could walk in with an A and fail the whole class. And that was just super stressful. So this is just a regular project. It's just a regular quiz. Don't worry about, beating yourself up over stuff like that. It's all good. You've seen the air quizzes, you know what they look like. They're going to be open book, open notes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up for Tuesday at 8 a.m. Eastern time, which is the school time. And it will close on Thursday at 11:59 is when it has to be finished. So that's going to give you guys 2.5 days, or two and 2/3 days actually. So that gives you a good amount of time to be able to get it completed and whatnot. You shouldn't have any problems. Should take about between 35 minutes and an hour is what the last few quizzes have been like. So that's about how long it should take you as far as that goes. So just kind of keeping an idea of what it's going to look like and stuff. All right, let's look at programming for the web, and there's programming for the web falls into two main categories. Is it done on the client side, which means inside your web browser? And that can be whatever web browser you're using. The most common ones out there, Chrome is probably the most common one that's being used right now. After that, it's kind of a race for second between Firefox, Microsoft Edge, Opera, and there's some other lesser known ones that are not really widely used except by either certain niche markets or in some cases a country or regional area. Like Opera is not real popular here in the US. However, in its home country, which I am blanking on what it is right now off the top of my hand, it's in Eastern Europe. It was very popular at one point. I don't know if it still is or not, but at one point it had like 40% of market share in its home country. So it just kind of depends upon what it is. Now, all the modern major ones have the ability to do client-side programming. And what that means is that the web designer or web developer, depending upon what you call yourself and things like that, they have written some scripts that the browser can work with. Now, it used to be that different browsers supported different languages, and that was really, really convoluted. That gets hard to maintain. It gets hard to work with. And so what's happened is that there's been standard boards that have gone out there and said, okay, we're going to have this standard, and we're going to call it ECMA script. And if you are ECMA version XYZ, or it's usually like X.YZ type thing, then in your browser, you say, I'm going to be compatible with this version. That means that you have to be compatible and do all these functions and do them in this basic manner. That way, there's a lot more consistency. So it's a lot easier to code with a client-side scripting language now than it was. The ECMA script is basically just JavaScript. It has technically a few little tweaks to it, but for all intents and purposes, ECMA script and JavaScript, you can think of them interchangeably. So I reference it as JavaScript here inside the notes and stuff that goes around. We've already seen how to add an external script, and that's using the script tag and then specifying a source element. So if you say script and source, you can specify a script file, and it just needs to usually have a .js extension for JavaScript extension. You can see here in the source attribute, I said that it's going to be in a separate folder called scripts. If I have a really large, complicated website that has a lot of scripting involved, I'll sometimes do this just to organize my files a little bit easier. And then you can see here it's got the extension .js. That's a standardized notation. If you don't do that, there's some other things you have to do to make sure that the browser sees what type of file it is and handles it. Now, I can also embed my script directly within my web page. And the way I do that, it would be to ignore this SRC attribute and put the script inside of these two script tags. And that's why there's two script tags, an opening and closing tag, is so you can write your script right there if you want to. Now, most of the time, I'm going to try to use an external script if I can. Often for the same reasons I use an external CSS file. And that is, I can share this file amongst other web pages, and I don't have to ask my end user to download it all at one, for every page. They download it one time, and then the browser is going to store that information as a cached file and let it stay there. So that's essentially what I'm doing, just exactly the same way as why I'm doing it with a CSS document. It's to speed up the performance of my web browser. It also makes it easier if I make a change on page 1, I need to make a change on page 2. I don't have to go into both and try to keep them up to date. It's made in one location and both places get it. You might say, well, why would I need that? Well, sometimes I have scripts that handle things like drop-down menus or other types of things. And so scripts can do a lot of different things that interact and show and hide elements inside my web page. That's not all that they're used for, but that's a big part of what they're used for. And so anytime I have something like that, I want to make sure that's going to work the way I expect. Now, if I have something that's unique to my page, I'll sometimes make a unique file to my page. I still sometimes keep it external, especially if it's a larger situation. That way I can download it in parallel, which means I'm downloading two files at the same time. That speeds up my processing as well. Now, the other thing that a lot of times they're going to use is to retrieve data from a web server. And there's a process called Ajax. And Ajax is an acronym that stands for Asynchronous JavaScript. I forgot the second A is for XML. And the basic idea is that I'm going to go and asynchronously, and that means regardless of what the web page is doing behind the scenes, I'm going to make a call like JavaScript and fetch what's known as XML data from the server. Now, that's a little bit misleading because I no longer have to get just XML data. I can get plain text data, I can get JSON data, I can get other things. But what happens is I can then go in and build out my web page, loading in content that I wouldn't normally see. That is a huge, huge benefit to me. Because what that means is that now I can go in and load up data from another location or from the server. For example, and a lot of you guys had mentioned this in our first website review or two, where you would load a page and it would keep on loading data for you, loading news articles as you scroll down. You never got to the end of the web page. That's called infinite scrolling, and it doesn't happen automatically. It happens because of these Ajax calls. It says, hey, I noticed, you're on I loaded 5 articles and you're on the 4th one. You might want the next couple. Let me go and get those and I'll insert them in the bottom of the page for you. That way, when you keep on scrolling, they're already there. And you don't have to go and try to click a next button to load up some more or anything like that. So Ajax is what is the mechanism that allows JavaScript to go in and load additional articles for you. So you have that infinite scroll idea until you eventually at some point just run out. And hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully you've got, oh, I've started to see all these as old stuff, and you go someplace else. But that's the basic idea of it. And there's some frameworks that can make this happen a lot easier. I mean, I can code stuff the quote unquote the hard way, but why would I want to? So a lot of times, web developers will use something called a framework. Sometimes people call it a library, and there's very similar things to it. There's also some differences. A code library is usually a set of functions to help you do a specific type of task. A framework tends to be a solution for a lot of common problems. And a framework doesn't completely solve them. Libraries will sometimes completely solve your issues, so you just have to give it a couple of parameters to fix. Where a framework is going to solve more problems, but because it's going to solve more problems, a lot of times you're only going to get like 80% of the work done for you. You have to fill in that last 20%. Um, so it kind of depends on what you're needing to use. There's some really good libraries and frameworks out there for JavaScript. Just a couple that you might see will be things like jQuery. That was one of the first really popular ones that helped us work with interacting with the web page. Now there's things like React and Vue, and there's others out there. In fact, there's a kind of a running joke that every day one or more JavaScript frameworks are created, and part of it's because of how easy it is. Part of it's because of all the different things that web designers are having to do. And someone goes, I've had to do this on 3 different websites. Why don't I create a framework around it so that I don't have to keep on reinventing the wheel? And so there's some really interesting things that happen from there. The other thing that JavaScript gets used for a lot, because it does work directly with the elements on a web page, and what's nice about it is it doesn't have to go to the server necessarily, is that it can be used for checking form validation. And form validation is just simple things like if you've ever gone to fill out a form and it comes back and says, oh, your email address was missing, or oh, your passwords didn't match. And it showed a little pop-up message and maybe scrolled you to where it was. Those are examples of form validation that probably occurred on the client side. So it occurred all within the browser. You never had to submit something to a server to verify that it was working or not working, anything like that. It was all done here. And the advantage of doing it inside the browser means that no data gets transmitted. That means less bandwidth usage, which is cheaper for the end, for the client and their web hosting. It means that their processor isn't having to run to double check stuff unnecessarily and send it back and forth. Now, you can turn JavaScript off in your web browser, and so it's not good to rely just upon JavaScript for your form validation. And that can be everything from making sure things like your social security number was entered correctly, you filled out your job application form right and had all your different fields that need to be submitted there correctly. So I mean, you can incorporate stuff like that as well, don't get me wrong, but you can do other things with it. And the idea is, if I do it here for that form validation, I gotta save it from having to go back and forth 2 or 3 times, unless someone has turned off JavaScript. And that's the reason why you don't want to rely on it only, but you still want to do it, is to prevent all that back and forth, transmitting data back and forth, sending information to work back and forth, and eat up both your bandwidth and your processor power. So let's look at the server side and kind of talk about that. As I was, leading into that, is your server side can do it has a lot more flexibility with what it can do. And part of that's because your client side is focused mostly on JavaScript, is focused mostly on what's inside of your browser. Even if I go out and make that Ajax call, what I'm doing is I'm going out and requesting a file from the server, and it's giving it back to me for me to insert into the web page. It's not able to directly get information from the server. And that has advantages and disadvantages, I'll be honest. But the biggest advantage is going to be security. Keeping those two things kind of isolated is a really good idea, because if I had, as a JavaScript person, had access to change anything I wanted on the server and make server calls, I could delete data or modify data and stuff like that, um, then that would be a real problem, because I can go in and dynamically change what's inside my web browser before it goes and runs, and we don't want that. On the server on the server side though, one thing that is interesting is where with JavaScript you basically have just JavaScript on your client side programming. On your server side programming, you have a lot of different opportunities language wise. I've listed a couple of them here that you can see. There's more, but you have Java, and Java is not JavaScript. Don't confuse the two. Um, you've got ASP.NET, you got Ruby and Python and PHP, as well as a lot of others. Some that were real popular years ago, like Perl, are rarely used nowadays. But if you guys have been keeping track, there was an issue a few weeks ago. The governor of New Jersey, which is a state a little bit northeast of us in Tennessee, um, he made a public call for Cobol developers. And Cobol is a language that um, was real popular in the 60s. It's over 50 years old. It was real popular in the 60s. It's hardly used anymore for new work, but there's lots of existing applications that run it, including in their case, the unemployment software. Um, and they were just overwhelmed because of how many people are filing for unemployment. So um, that's kind of an interesting problem. Um, so you still will see some old websites done with Perl or some other languages. You can even write stuff in C and C++. Rare to find it, but it does happen, as there are other languages that you can find and use as well. Which language is going to be used by a website depends on a lot of things. Everything from what does the server support? Some servers don't have other code libraries installed. Some it's going to be based upon what is the developers comfortable with. If I'm a Python developer, I may not want to code in Java because I don't know Java, and I would have to learn Java in order to do it. So you've got that in mind, and then sometimes it's depending upon what capabilities are you looking to get. Are you looking to tie into other um, applications? I was responsible for a website that tied into a huge CRM system. And so we did all of our programming in ASP.NET because that gave us libraries to work with to tie into our CRM system. CRM, for those of you not familiar, stands for Customer Relationship Management. And so how we would track our customers and what orders that they made, and what products they owned and had service contracts on, all that type of stuff, was all managed in this huge external system, and we wanted to have direct access to it. And the easiest way to do that was to use the libraries that are written in ASP.NET. And so that's what we did with them. So it just kind of depends on what you're trying to do. Now, we already mentioned that the client side has those kind of limitations where I can't go and talk directly to the server. I've got to request a file, and it might run one of these other languages to generate the data for me. And that works really good because now I can control what's happening, and I can make sure that someone's not trying to do updates and deletes and stuff like that. I've got a lot more control on my server-side applications as far as that goes. Excuse me. So anything that on the server I can access, I can start to work with. Now, sometimes I'll be limited to just read-only information. Other times I have full ability to control, modify, and even delete data. So I got to be real careful with that. But it gives me a lot more control that I can start to manage. And I can start to look at and control things that go between browsers as long as I stay signed in. So for example, if I'm on Amazon and I pull up my Amazon account, I sign into it at work or at my parents' house or on my laptop or on my desktop, Amazon knows who I am, and they say, hey, you know what? Based upon what products you've looked at, here's the next top 10 things we think you want to go and spend money on. And you might go, wait a second, is this really what I want? Want? Yes, no. And I look through them, and I might, you know, check off one. No, I'm not interested in this one. Oh yeah, I'm gonna go buy this one. And I get to that page, I get to the product page, and I'm looking at, whatever it is. Uh, let's say I'm looking at like a new 3D printer because I'm interested in 3D printing. And Amazon's going to go say, hey, I know someone who's gone and looked at 3D printing. And in fact, I know of thousands of people who have searched for 3D printing. And so I'm going to go and show them, and you might notice you scroll kind of down towards the bottom of the web page that has people who search for 3D printers also look at these models. And it'll bring up like a little chart to compare and contrast them and stuff like that. Or maybe up closer to the top says, I know you're about ready to purchase some 3D filament. People who purchase 3D filament have also purchased at the same time spare nozzles or this or that or whatever. So what it's doing is it's taken all this information that'd be far too complex to send to a browser to have to sort through. But they can sort through it on their servers a lot easier. Data doesn't go back and forth. It's already there on the server. They can take all that information and now start to make product recommendations to me. This happens all the time. Amazon is notorious for it. But have you ever noticed that maybe you search for something on Google and you're browsing a web page, the next day or 2 days later, and you see an ad for something that you looked at? It's called a retargeting ad. And Google is keeping track of every time you go and you search for something. And it's saying, oh, you look for this? Let me show you links to this again in other places and stuff like that. And they do that by when they serve up their ads, and how they process that is how they determine what ads to show you is all done on the back end on their servers. So why can they do that? Because they have tons of data. They know every web page that you've been going to, and every time you do a search. There are certain caveats to that, but they know a lot of that type of stuff to help figure out what's the best way to sell you something. So you want to be really careful with that if you ever wonder what happens. The same thing's going to happen on social media sites. I go to facebook.com, it's going to look different than you going to facebook.com. Why? When we sign in, it knows who our friends are. It knows what type of content we like to look at. It knows what type of content's real popular right now, and will pull all that information for us. So the server-side data can process a lot more data because it doesn't have to be transmitted across the internet. It's already right there. It tends to behave a little bit faster because JavaScript on the client side has to be read, processed, and then do its work. Where on the server side, some of it may be pre-compiled, some of it may be optimized for that server, and so a lot of times it's going to be faster. And the whole idea is it's going to spit out what looks like HTML for you. Now, sometimes they'll be doing things, a combination of JavaScript and web server-side programming. And Facebook is a good example. As I scroll through Facebook or I scroll through Twitter or something like that, it's under the idea of the infinite scroll. So I'm going to keep on having my feed reload and show me new stuff as I'm scrolling down instead of it just timing out or me reaching the end and there's no new stuff on Facebook. They don't want that. They want you to keep looking and scrolling and all that type of stuff. So that's a very big of how they work. And like I said, that can occur with a combination, and there's much more that melding, especially as our computers have become faster and our internet connections have become faster and stuff like that. And so there's specialty frameworks that work to help meld those two pieces together. But regardless of how closely they meld together, there are some things that your server-side languages are required for and can only do for the most part. And they act as like a gatekeeper. So even if they request something from a client side, the server has the ability to override and go, nope, I don't think so. And a good example, if we kind of circle back to form validation with that, as a server, I don't know if the client has form validation on or off, if they got JavaScript turned on or off to do that form validation. So I don't want to just trust it. So I'll go back and double check it, acting as that final gatekeeper, just double checking, making sure. And you might go, but I already made sure I filled this form out right. And I'm the server application going, I hear you, but I'm just going to double check. And oh wait, I noticed you forgot. And it gives them ability to double check. Now, hopefully, if the end user is using JavaScript and hasn't disabled it, it's already pre-caught that problem. It's not an issue. But like I said, it's just like a gatekeeper just to make sure that there's no other issues that you might have in unexpectedly showing up with your server-side applications. All right. Is there any questions about any, before I kind of stop this, any questions about the stuff today and what we talked about and the difference between client-side and server-side programming?
No.
Okay.
No questions.
So this takes us all the way back. If you go well, I remember us talking about servers. This takes us all the way back to one of the first topics we talked about, which is when we start talking about web data and content creation, the role of the browser, the role of the web server. This takes us all the way back to week 2. So this is kind of closing the loop, how it all comes back and fits in together. If you said, at any point, didn't I remember talking about this before? Yes, and this is the reason why. Not that we looked at these functions of it, but how it all interconnects. And that's one of the biggest challenges with teaching HTML and web design is everything just interconnects together, and how do you pull out little pieces. So hopefully that's gone. I've done a good job of that this term for you. I do want to check and see if you guys have any questions since our last quiz that we had. So we'd be looking at things like list, images, design, tables, forms, and then the client-side programming. So those 5 weeks. Any questions on that information?
No.
Okay. Like I said, the quiz, I'm going to open it up tomorrow starting at 8 a.m. Eastern time, which is where the school is located. You'll have 2 hours, I think, 2 days and 16 hours, I think. So 2 3/4 hours, or 2 2/3 days. All my words are running together. 2 2/3 days to the whole thing. If you have questions between now and then, please email me. For you two especially, because you guys have been able to come and all type of stuff. Your grades are good, so I'm not concerned about you at all. If you do have any questions that come up, please feel free to email me. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions via email that you guys got, or if you want to come to one of the office hours, I will have office hours tomorrow as well. The quiz will be open notes and open book, so feel free to review the notes or the Google book that I shared with you guys, so you all should have access to that. All the information that the quiz will be coming from will be from those locations. So should make it easy for you guys. All right. With that, that is everything I have to cover. We're done a little bit early. So I have planned more time for review, but you guys don't need it, and that's good. I'm happy you guys are all up to date and stuff. So thank you for this term. I know this has been kind of a weird term. It's been weird and a challenge for me. I know it's been weird and a challenge for a lot of you guys as well. So thank you for sticking around. I know it's been a tough haul with having to switch to online in the middle. No one was expecting it. Hopefully I made it as painless as possible. But I'll stick around if you guys need me. Otherwise, though, I'm done. So if you guys want to sign off and start working on something else, because I'm sure you guys got final projects and everything else for other classes, I understand that too. So I'm here if you need me, but if you don't, feel free to sign off. And hope you all have a good and safe summer.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
Thank you.
All right.